What do you associate with the winter season? It can be a season of true dualities, with warm fireplaces, hot cocoa being enjoyed under a Christmas tree, but also harsh, unforgiving weather right outside for months on end. So with all that in mind, I'm sure that you have associations of your own, and if you've been a part of the Tam Valley community for long enough, you know the drill. Over on my Discord, I wanted to see your finest winter Pokemon. Anything you could dream up that reflected your personal thoughts on the winter season, be it a regional form, convergent species, or completely original Fakemon. I tried my hand at redesigning some of your submissions that I feel needed perhaps a conceptual boost or artistic reimagining to take to the next level and look more like a Pokemon. But of course, keep in mind that my official art style is always growing and changing, and isn't necessarily a one-to-one with the official Pokemon art style. So don't take these as objective improvements, but rather just my interpretations of awesome Fakemon. Perhaps with a little bit of lessons along the way on how to draw in the Pokemon style based on what I've learned nearly half a dozen installments of this epic ongoing series. Of course, stick around to the very end to support all the artists that weren't submitted for redesigns as well, since we'll be running through each and every Discord submission, over 40 this season. Without further ado, let's settle into the winter season. As always, I like to keep it nice and simple to start out, so here's a universal symbol of the season. Here's Cherubell from Jack, an adorable convergent form of Cherubell, cleverly taking after a sleigh bell used for Christmas caroling. I like the idea of making an inanimate object Pokemon, a bell, but giving it features that closely resemble a pre-existing organic Pokemon. A nice challenge. So for my redesign, I made a few key changes. One, I changed up the expression to have the same eye and mouth proportions as Cherubell, but giving it striking cyan blue eyes, almost like a baby angel. I think this makes it look really cute, while also clearly resembling the Pokemon that it's a convergent of. I also made a major change by adding another mini bell and removing the thin ribbon that connects them in favor of a more robust, Christmassy bow. Firstly, I just had a lot of trouble making the ribbon look good. It felt like the two bells were disconnected and inanimate. Instead, this looks like a cluster of berries, now bells, and the presence of 3 Cherubells now could possibly reference the Catholic concept of the Trinity? Don't quote me on that, I do not celebrate Christmas in any religious sense. I also like the idea of future convergent Pokemon having some difference from the Pokemon that they mimic, more like Poltergeist rather than having the exact same body plan. Cherubell, the Sleigh Bell Pokemon. These Pokemon travel the globe, migrating across colder temperatures to liven the spirits of people and Pokemon during the winter months. Cherubell are often seen in large groups joining forces to produce songs with the bell sound that reverberates in their metallic bodies. The more Cherubell, the more complex and lively these songs become. Even those dealing with emotions of despair or anger can't help but smile and feel warmth in their hearts when surrounded by the smooth chimes of Cherubell. Despite their hard exterior, these Pokemon can actually change the feeling of their bodies to become as soft as feathers to bring comfort to children and those in need. They evolve into their feathered, angelic forms after proving they have both the skill and empathy to bring immense joy to those around them. This Pokemon would also have the signature move, Bell Toll. This status move would clear allied status conditions and infatuate opposing Pokemon regardless of gender. Next up, let's talk about one of the most interesting aspects of winter to me. In many cultures, it seems that the overwhelming darkness this time of year inspires the embrace of light. Hence why there are so many festivals and celebrations centered around the winter solstice that focus on bringing light into one's life. Something that is definitely needed when it gets dark at like 3 p.m. the further north you go. Think of Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, and even the ancient Roman tradition of Saturnalia. Hence this submission from Paradigm Sigillawax, from Sigillaria. Small figurines depicting gods, goddesses, or animals given during the wintertime festival of light in ancient Rome. I love inanimate object Pokemon, and I love how this Pokemon feels so universal. It has a pretty recognizable childlike physique without looking too uncanny and could feasibly represent any holiday, not just Saturnalia. My interpretation focused on the basics, simplifying the shape and the silhouette and leaving only details conservatively. Not to dominate the texture of the body or to make bumpy, complex lines, but instead only drawing enough to show that yes, this is a candle Pokemon without drawing literally every piece of dripping wax. It's about conveying a message about the Pokemon's overall features in a constrained fashion, as Pokemon often does. I also really liked removing the mouth to give this Pokemon a blank expression. I've been trying to shy away from that in recent times, since I love a strong personality, and I've become more confident in showcasing those. But you'll see why the blank expression works for this particular Pokemon in a moment. Lastly, I also removed the rings that the original artist included, since I couldn't justify them in any way, especially for a Pokemon that is just meant to be a candle, a burning wick, and not much more. Perhaps if it had an evolved form, you could include a little more divine details like that. Sigillawax, the Wax Child Pokemon. It is said that this Pokemon was born when a candle was given form around 2,000 years ago, imbued with psychic energy from the kind hearts of those lighting its wick for the first time. Similar to a child, these Pokemon are curious about the world around them, and seek to further their knowledge of all things human, almost as if they yearn to be seen as one. However, they remain as clumsy as a newborn child, often igniting curtains on fire with its ever-aflame wick. These Pokemon are often given during the holidays to people who don't have Pokemon, remaining loyal lifelong companions. Despite its simple, replicable shape, not all candles in the form of this Pokemon become living Sigillawax. Nonetheless, these candles are given as gifts and lit around the world as symbols of renewal, life, and spirit. Next up, let's take a look at another object of the season through Baublorb, from Skunky Spinda. These rotund bugs are based on Christmas ornaments, primarily the stereotypical red, green, and gold sphere ornaments that you see on trees pretty much everywhere. Everyone has these kind of ornaments somewhere, so I'm glad we can translate such a great symbol of Christmas. I like how the artist completely leaned into the origin, making this Pokemon as round and shiny as possible. However, for my redesign, I opted to give a little more emphasis to this Pokemon's secondary inspiration, which I thought was either an aphid or a tick. Both circular types of bugs that suck on various fluids, either sap or blood respectively, to fill up their semi-translucent bodies. So I wanted to give this Pokemon a more arachnid-like head with little horns and fangs, with a hollow glass body that would expand rounder and rounder, and of course change color when filled up with the sap that this Pokemon consumes, thus looking more like an ornament. This particular pose shows it at about 2/3 full with sap sloshing around in its body, and also shows the difference between the head and the body, which I think is essential for bug Pokemon. I do like what the original artist did by having them be one and the same, but I do think that segmentation is important when you want something to be read as a bug. Baublorb, the Ornament Pokemon. Baublorb are jovial, gluttonous Pokemon who delight on consuming a special kind of tree sap. They will latch themselves onto the trunks of trees with a firm grip, and siphon sap to sustain themselves for the winter months. One can tell what kind of nectar this Pokemon has consumed based on the coloration of its hollow body, which becomes engorged and more saturated the more Baublorb fills itself up. Some Baublorb engorge themselves so much that they can hardly move until spring comes. This Pokemon can display almost any color, and stand out against the white snow of winter. In certain regions, the sight of these Pokemon latching onto trees in brightly hued hordes has inspired a wintertime tradition of painting or staining glass orbs in a wide array of colors, and attaching it to trees at home, in tribute to this Pokemon's amusing survival mechanism. Notice that I gave this Pokemon multiple forms, starting with the standard Christmas colors of green, red, and gold. Do you have other ideas? Let me know down below. I imagine these would be purely cosmetic and perhaps similar to Vivillon. This Pokemon would take its color depending on its location. These Pokemon could then be traded or exchanged similar to different colored ornaments from all across the world in real life. Next up, let's step away from romanticizing the season and turn to one part of winter that I think may be unanimously disliked. Slush. This goes to show what a great submission we got from Shield Does Pixels with Snowdent, a toxic slush rat. I do hate slush, but this submission is on point, from the name to the sludgy colored gradient on its body, to the way the fur looks like the whole Pokemon is melty and slushy. For my redesign, I opted for a more streamlined athletic design, to allude to this Pokemon's habit of digging through slush to find berries, rather than looking static with a pile of snow dumped on it. I also did this to give it more of a Pokemon-ish look, since the concept from the original artist was fantastic, but I feel like Redmore is just a cartoon rat, proportion-wise. To that end, I gave this Pokemon more exaggerated eyes and splotchy specks of dirt, mud, and toxic slush stuck to its body, which I think pops well against the more saturated pink on its paws and its nose. But to be truthful, this is just how I would interpret the concept. I struggle to label this one as a redesign, because I hardly added or changed any elements from the original. I kept the toxic purple ears, mound of slush on the back, and the same general colors. So this felt like a lateral move to me. that I was satisfied enough to include and discuss. But I also wanted to be reflective as an artist and recognize when I can't claim to be entirely satisfied with my work. Maybe it was that I didn't add too much, or maybe it was because the proportions to me aren't fixed quite. They kind of look like a real rat as well. But let me know, what do you think of this one? Snowdent, the slush rat Pokemon. This Pokemon is commonly found in huge swarms in urban areas, where they burrow into toxic slush on roads and footpaths, seemingly undeterred by oil, debris, or other pollutants. Using their firm paws and slick, slender bodies, these Pokemon dig for leftover berries preserved by the icy cold, and hoard them for winter. This Pokemon uses the insulating effect of the slush that sticks to its matted fur to survive the coldest periods of the season, since its body is way too small to preserve heat. As they are commonly seen with annoyance or disgust by humans, they are a highly cooperative species amongst themselves. And last but not least, from X2 Piggy, we get Krampin, an evolution for Delibird that is based on Krampus, which is a figure from European folklore that is almost Santa's evil twin, seeking to punish wrongdoers during the holiday season. This is great conceptually. First of all, I love the idea of a Pokemon evolving to become more powerful and keeping its abilities, but almost entirely switching up personality and motivation-wise, meaning the way it uses its powers. I also love this purple combination. Instead of opting for a more predictable dark red or black, purple works really nice as an underrated color to represent evil, mischief, or anything negative. However, my redesign sought to improve a few things. I wanted to fix the shape language here, since the original art felt stuck somewhere between wanting to make the Pokemon bigger and also taller. So here we just committed to one, making it a big fat evolution with an even bigger burlap sack that's a lot darker and dirtier looking than Delibird's. I also reduced the details on the face, leaving only 4 big face feathers above the beard to exaggerate the cartoonish mustache and eyebrows of this bird. I think with evolutions to existing Pokemon, you really get a license to do less. Less is more, since you can just exaggerate and expand upon the simple details present in the original design without adding too much new. In this case, leaning confidently into entirely new proportions, and just making the feathers way bigger. Krampin, the naughty Pokemon. Only a select number of Delibird can undergo this evolution, which shares almost nothing in common with their past lives. These Pokemon live solitary atop frozen mountains, hoarding resources for themselves and refusing to share with anyone. At night, these vengeful Pokemon sneak into mountain villages and use their icy wings and sharp beak to ransack the homes of those that they dislike. Krampin will take what they want, stashing it in its massive beard and returning to its hoard above. Occasionally, Krampin will leave behind jet black pieces of coal to taunt its victims. Despite this behavior, Krampin views itself as acting justly, punishing only those that it believes to be a wrongdoer. As always, the Fakemon that I redesigned were little more than a fraction of the total submissions I got from all of you. I am consistently floored at just how popular this challenge is, especially this season, where we saw about 40 submissions, the highest ever. So kudos to all of you, and way to cap off the year. Let's run through each and every one of them, where I can talk a little bit about what I like about the design or where I could see it improved. Keep in mind, I'm not an expert artist, so I may have improvements, but I didn't get around to drawing your Fakemon because I couldn't execute the ideas that I had in mind, or I just ran out of time. Speaking of which, there were so many submissions that I only have so much time to discuss each one. But of course, I want to celebrate each and every one of you. So let's start with Gluttony from Welsh. This is a nice Pokemon based on Mariluid, a decorated horse school that gets paraded around to celebrate winter. It's a really cool way to showcase a holiday that most of us don't know about, as you can tell by my pronunciation. And I like that it's based on a horse, but still looks really ambiguous, and thus original. It looks kind of like Shiftry, if that makes sense. Reindeer from Tony G is also a nice classic winter Fakemon. I like that it has the right amount of details, with the simplicity that Pokemon demands. It's kind of a miracle that this Pokemon has wings, skates, reindeers, lights, and wreaths, but it doesn't feel overly complicated. Just Ivan here has a skater-style Oricorio that's looking 99% of the way to being official. I've wanted more Oricorio forms for a while, and skating is clever because skating kind of straddles the line between dance and sport. Okay, and here's Oricryo from Whoops, which is a snowball tail Pokemon based on a rabbit. I usually like vague Pokemon quite a bit. Had I redesigned this one, I would have made it less vague, maybe giving it a more clear dash of personality or a tertiary inspiration, maybe making the mounds of snow on its neck and ears look like fancy winter clothes, but this is fine as a base form. It's solid. Surplacer from Spades maybe needs one extra element to take it to the next level as well. You have the start of it with the ice looking like a parka, but the real challenge is deciding what the blue on its body could be. It's kind of confusing what it's supposed to be currently. A tube of ice? Does it insulate it like a thermos or a sleeping bag? There's a lot of angles that you could take that would be great. Hibernal Lantern was brought to us by Volley Blue. This artist definitely has the Pokemon shading style down. This lantern, at least the body, is really solid. I like the idea of a cold water anglerfish instead of something tropical. The problem is that the ice sheets look too contrasting from the slick, simplified body. It kind of looks like Lantern is stuck on an ice sheet, which I don't think we really want. We want it to look part of its body, especially if this is a lantern that lives in cold water. I would integrate it into the body, making its lure frozen or giving it sharp elements like fangs or armor. Maybe just a frozen underside would work. Churro T Nerd Stackataka is absolutely genius. This is legitimately my favorite entry from this entire thing. It's so good that I didn't even want to touch it. It's based on an advent calendar, and it really pushes the bounds of Pokemon in a way that an Ultra Beast should. It's beautiful. I love the colors. I love everything about this. It's perfect. Same goes for Enderscore's Polythermy. The shading and level of detail are absolutely perfect in my opinion. It really looks like an old school Sugimori inspiration, but with kind of the level of contrast and inspiration that modern Pokemon requires. You know, with the frozen tongue looking like a thermometer. That's really cool. This absolutely beautiful Vendolph, which is a Wendigo, comes to us from Martin Rizalski. This artist knows how to convey their vision in a way that really also needs no feedback. It's equal parts beautiful and frightening. My only advice is to probably make it a little rounder and maybe more simplified. Just a dash of another personality type to make this Pokemon less universally sharp and scary, because Pokemon designers often say each and every design is done with balance in mind. Even the scariest Pokemon have a cute element. But as it stands though, this looks like a flawless enemy from any number of other game franchises. This kind of reminds me of like a Breath of the Wild enemy, and I mean that in the best way possible. Same goes for Frosttempt from Not Dracu-Nightmare, a great concept, a haunted box with flawless execution in the artist's own style. To make it a better Pokemon though, I would just add some small details like stitches or pins, maybe some heavy cross-hatching to show the texture of the haunted puppet, make the concept even clearer. But otherwise it's really good. Gym Leader JC's Jinglemite is a nice convergent form of Magnemite, made out of wrapping presents. I think the level of detail is perfect for often ornate wrapping paper, and the colors are classic because it looks like wrapping paper but also peppermint. It's really nothing I would have changed, except maybe adding some creases or tape marks if you do in fact want the magnets to look like wrapped presents, but otherwise pretty good. The Puff continues their streak of food-based submissions. I think this is 3 in a row now, with Candine. A nice candy cane puppy. I like everything going on here. The only thing I would change is maybe giving some texture to the fur to avoid it looking like a literal candy cane tail, but the colors that are picked out are really flawless. Some Maiden from Reezy Peasy is equally as airtight. A fearsome owl, inspired by the mythical Iron Maiden torture device. I would only change one thing here, and that's removing or at least trimming down the sharp mountain-like feathers on its head. It's a bit too distracting from the primary concept. I'd rather just lean into the main concept with larger wings and spikes to really showcase the fearsome grasp of this Pokemon. If you want it to be an ice type, you don't really need other icy things like a mountain on the body. Just make the spikes made of ice, or, just the white color would showcase that, I think. Similar to Stackataka, Iron Joy from Bloody 359 is another over-the-top submission that I think gets licensed to be that way because it's a Paradox and Mega Pokemon. A futuristic Mega Abomasnow literally bursting at the seams with winter joy. The conveyance of motion here is pretty good. I like imagining the cold mist billowing out through its bag chimneys and how good Christmas light colors work for the typical Paradox visual language. Typically it's just like one neon color, but this goes all out with the whole strand of rainbow lights. And it's great. I don't know how realistic it is for the franchise as it stands, but it's amazing. Hoarding Claws from Jack would have been fun to tackle had we not taken on Krampin, because it's pretty similar, but this time it's just a past Paradox of Daily Bird itself. The hand-drawn aesthetic here really works to showcase this Pokemon's gross caveman-like qualities. My only tiny suggestion is to change the proportions, maybe make it a little fatter or make the sack that it carries larger or different from Delibirds, but this is otherwise pretty airtight. Now, Mega Rayquaza's Frostatier is a really neat design. It's a haunted marionette snowman. I do think this is kind of flawless, especially one arm being a scarf and one being a branch. It's the kind of asymmetry and visual memorability that I think is required for such a object mod. It's a flawless concept, and it's similar to my art style, as I feel this artist often is, so I couldn't have really improved it in any way. Same goes for Carcold, which is a clever convergent form of the Roly-Coly family from Dolphin Dance 10. I think the artist changed just enough about these Pokemon to have a flawless and believable concept, like wheels for skis, and the Colossal, or Coldlossal variants being a mound of snow held together by the sled on its back. It's genius. The high quality continues with Espirito's Columbiate. It's not often that this challenge embraces the more serene and warm aspects of winter, so I really love this submission. This bird is super believable for the franchise. Spearmint is a fantastic third evolution to the Charcadet family from Forgotten Moonweaver, a good mix of Nutcracker Soldier and Peppermint Candy. This would have been awesome to tackle, but I didn't because I created a much different Pokemon but with the exact same concept in last year's winter video. Sassafrasnid brought us Spoonlicker Impidimp, a really neat variation of Impidimp that is based on the delightfully weird and 100% real Icelandic Yule Lads. I'm just so glad that I learned about that folklore through this submission because just go look it up. I also love that this, kind of takes a page out of Blood Moon Ursaluna because there's precedent in the official franchise now for these non-regional forms that still kind of have a cosmetic or lore change, but without the pressure of having to change the type or anything like that. The options are really endless with this genre of Pokemon design, so I hope to see more of this. Mage Queen's Hollymoth is definitely a design that I wish I got to. There's good potential here for a good Route 1 bug based on Holly. The Corvid's Cardinoko is an adorable counterpart to Columbiate, this time being a northern cardinal mixed with hot chocolate. It's a very cozy design that I really couldn't improve in any way. Plus a bonus submission from this artist's younger sibling, an ice variant of Lycanroc. This is a very natural fit for a regional variant, and the colors are on point. We will watch this young artist's career with great interest. Boreal Mind's Cryocanny is based on a pretty niche part of Pokemon mechanics, the Yachi Berry. I definitely see the berry colors itself in the design, so very clever. I think we need more Pokemon based on specific items, besides the decoy ones like Voltorb or Amoonguss. The only thing that I would have changed is perhaps making this Pokemon more stout and fluffy like those Avalanche rescue dogs in the snow, because as it stands it looks way too slim and upright to read as a dog. This Palisand from Boods is also one of those submissions that I consider legitimately flawless. I like the inspiration, a warm hearth, and the style that the artist used. Plum sent in Snow Ray, this snowy eel. It's a simple design, and sometimes simple is good. But I do wish I could have gotten to this one too, because I think it would have benefited from more stylization for proportions and maybe a little concept. I think these snowflake patterns on the body, what if they were more accurately colored and shaped better so this Pokemon could use its vibrant patterns as a means of camouflaging in seas or something? It's just an idea, of course. Gamorreon27 sent in this awesome regional Solrock. The first time this challenge has done a tribute to my favorite holiday, the Jewish tradition of Hanukkah. So that's really exciting to get the representation here. This is awesome, but it suffers the same problem as the Pokemon above. I think it needs a clearer reflection of its powers or lore in its body, because as it stands, it's a three-dimensional Star of David. I would suggest swapping out the literal Hebrew characters for more abstract Pokemon symbols, perhaps making the rock weathered and chipped to denote its typing, and maybe making each triangle disconnected and floating separately, because it looks a little too blocky and artificial, but it's an awesome start conceptually. Zapling by Ampharos is so adorable. It reminds me of a baby dancing Groot. I think this artist has a great grasp on shading in the Pokemon style, something that I'm still learning myself, and a good sense of how to push the bounds of cartoonishness while it's still recognizably being a Pokemon. I would just change the head because it doesn't really look artificial, but it also doesn't really look like a plant. This unnamed owl from Skywatcher is also really cool. I like the concept of an ice type using mitten-like feathers to warm itself up. To better showcase this, I would avoid the side profile. Outstretching the left wing to show this as a feather warmer would be nice, and keeping the bundled up look of the right wing would be essential to show the personality. This family of gnomes from Escondida 17 is right out of Middle-earth, and I think it's a good start. I like the level of details and color, especially the evolved form. It reminds me of an ugly winter sweater. I would just hunch it over a little bit more, maybe kind of like a gorilla-ish pose to showcase the definition on the arms, since right now the silhouette of the design feels too bunched up. I know gnomes kind of have that, triangular, cylindrical look, but maybe just have that in the basic form and then give a little more three-dimensionality to the evolved one. This Phantom variant from Davka 9 is great. Maybe too artificial looking to be a true regional form with the Jirachi cookie and the lack of overall color change in the body, but otherwise it's a really solid piece of art. I love the hollow head being home to a variety of winter treats. Stinch from Krill is nice too. It's based on a copyrighted character, but still believable it's a Pokemon since the artist nailed the personality, colors, pose, and shading. Even the proportions feel right to me. I was originally going to take this one on as a resident Grump instead of Krampin, making it a more quadrupedal cat, skunk, or Wolverine, but the more I looked at it, the more it kind of felt perfect to me as a vague, more humanoid Pokemon, so I opted to leave it alone. And last but certainly not least, here is Hibernal Typhlosion from Threat to Swine. And hey, speaking of Wolverines, love how this one leans back into Typhlosion's origins. This is one of the few times that I've ever seen a Pokemon given its real-life inspiration's plain colors, without it feeling muted or just like a regular animal. It has a lot of style from these long claws and the fur cape. There really is nothing I could have done to improve this one. And just like that, we have reached the end of the Winter Art Challenge, both everyone's submissions that I managed to redesign and all the incredible ones that I didn't. Thank you to everyone who submitted. I can't express enough how much of an honor it is knowing that such a large number of you are willing to take the time to contribute to such a massive part of this channel and help me improve my art in the process. I hope we've been able to touch on aspects of winter that you know and love, or perhaps this video has given you the inspiration for a new winter tradition to adopt. Thank you to everyone who makes videos like this possible over on my Patreon, especially Guardian patron Dayton Wheezy. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for more content.